Let's end the debate on this radical legislation right now. Let's get to the real work of cutting deficits, creating jobs, and growing the economy. Madam Speaker, I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back. Gentleman from Utah.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd now like to recognize for 2 minutes the gentleman from Texas, member of the House Budget Committee, Mr. Flores.
Gentleman is recognized for 2 minutes.
Madam Speaker, on July 15, 2011, just 4 days ago, President Obama said, "We don't need a constitutional amendment to do our jobs." But the President clearly does. Let's go through the facts, which is, the other side has conveniently forgotten. In the 30 months that he's been President, the short 30 months, he's added almost $4 trillion to our national debt. That's $133 billion a month, $3.1 million per minute, $51,000 per second. We've seen the destruction of Medicare through the enactment of Obamacare, making Medicare insolvent by more than $60 trillion. You want to talk about Medicare destruction, you can look right over here and see Medicare destruction. We have almost 40 million Americans on food stamps, the most ever. We've spent $1 trillion on a stimulus plan, but we still have 1 out of every 6 working-age Americans either unemployed or unemployed. This is what Mr. Obama calls winning the future. That's what he threatened in his veto of cut, cap, and balance. He wants to win the future. Well, Mr. Obama, you're not winning the future. You're not winning anything. The Obama plan for our country is tax, spend, and regulate. Not winning the future. More taxes means fewer jobs. More spending and more debt, fewer jobs and less economic growth. More regulation, fewer jobs, less economic growth. And with the Obama plan, there's more. You get to have gasoline prices that are double what they were when he's inaugurated. But there is a real plan to correct this. Cut, cap, and balance takes away the blank check that this Congress has exercised for decades and that this President clearly seems to enjoy. It's time we stop the blank check spending now and take the necessary steps to force Washington to act responsibility and live within its means, just like my constituents in Texas do already. It's time for cut, cap, and balance. Mr. Obama, when I was sworn in, my constituents gave me a stamp.
Will suspend. The gentleman will suspend. Members,
Madam Speaker,
members, the chair would like to gently remind members to address their remarks to the chair and not to others in the second person. Gentleman's time has expired.
Madam Speaker, can I yield an additional 30 seconds to the gentleman from Texas?
Gentleman is recognized for an additional 30 seconds.
Thank you, Madam Chair. When I was sworn in, my constituents gave me a stamp that said, non-sufficient funds denied by taxpayers. Mr. Obama, your plan is denied by taxpayers. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Maryland.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. When we were all sworn in, we were also sworn to protect the Constitution of the United States, not manipulate the Constitution of the United States to protect special interest tax breaks for oil and gas companies or other special interests by implanting into that document a requirement that 2/3 of this body in the Senate have to vote to get rid of them for purposes of deficit reduction. I also think that while we're all entitled to our own opinions, we're not entitled to our own facts. If you look at the Medicare trustees report, it will indicate that the health care reform bill extended the life of the trust fund, and we also did it by getting rid of the overpayments to some of the Medicare Advantage plans that were being paid at 114% of what other plans were being paid for. Taxpayers were over-subsidizing those plans, as were Medicare recipients. And with that, I yield 3 minutes to a terrific member of the Budget Committee, Mr. Tonko.
Gentleman from New York is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the ranking member of the committee. There's not a single person in this chamber who doesn't want to balance the budget. But the legislation before us today is not about that. It is about enshrining a particularly radical interpretation of the Republican agenda in the foundational document, a precious document, our Constitution, that guides our system of government. If successful, it would put in place a cap on federal spending at 18% of GDP, turning back the clock more than half a century to the glory days of 1966. Though it makes for a great press release, why didn't anyone else think of this solution? Even President Reagan never once requested a federal budget that spent nearly this low. Well, to begin with, our population is much larger and much older on average than it was in 1966. Some see that as a problem. Seniors are expensive, they say. I suppose that's one way of looking at it. And if all you're worried about is how much Grandma's nursing home care costs, then this is the bill for you. But since 1966, Grandma is living, on average, nearly 10 years longer. There is no price you can place on that, and there is no question that it's because she's getting a guaranteed level of health care. This bill, according to their own leaders, enshrines the Republican plan to end Medicare in the United States Constitution. Right there, after the freedom of religion, the freedom of thought, the freedom of assembly, we can have the freedom from health care after age 65. This is nothing more than a political stunt, a gimmick that would change the fundamental rules of our democratic system so our Republican colleagues can make it easier to end Medicare and more difficult to cut tax giveaways to millionaires, to billionaires, and their friends of big oil. Let's stop this nonsense and get back to work. Let's stop the nonsense that is playing games with America's working families. They promote this as a way to fiscal sanity, but rather it's a lack of investment in sanity. It's an assault on our children, our families, our veterans, our seniors. Let's put America back to work. Let's invest in those opportunities and reduce the deficit as we move forward. Enough with the foolish gimmicks. I yield back the remainder of my time.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Utah.
Oh, I love that. Foolish gimmicks, balancing our budget. I'd now like to recognize the gentleman from Virginia for 2 minutes. Mr. Goodlatte.
The gentleman from Virginia is recognized for 2 minutes.
Ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks, and I rise
Without
in strong
objection.
support of the cap and balance legislation. I commend the gentleman from Utah and all the others who brought this forward. And here's why. Right here. We had a vote here on the floor of this House a few weeks ago about the President of the United States request, just give me a clean debt limit increase. Every single Republican and nearly a majority of the Democrats voted to do the opposite, to not give him a debt limit increase. This shows us why we are here today with cut, cap, and balance legislation. This is the track that the Democrats have us on right now. This is the track that would be on if the President had gotten his wish for a debt limit increase without any spending cuts, without any caps on future spending, and without what 80% of the American people want, which is a balanced budget amendment to the United States Constitution. This green line is what we're voting on today. This is what the House budget, already adopted by this institution, and that we're operating under right now with our appropriations bill, this is what would put us on a target to not only balance the budget, but also to pay off the $14 trillion national debt that we are faced with right now, our children and grandchildren are faced with, the future of our economy is faced with right now. So this is the choice that we have here today. Take care of the debt limit. Don't default. Don't default on our obligations. No one here wants to do that. But also, cut spending, cap spending, and pass a balanced budget amendment to the United States Constitution. In 1995, we came within one vote in the United States Senate after the House of Representatives cast 300 bipartisan votes for a balanced budget amendment to the United States Constitution. And now we have the opportunity to lay the groundwork to do it again, but this time to succeed. And we have much, much greater reason to do that because of the fact that we are faced with this mountain of red ink that we can turn into a bright future for America. I urge my colleagues to support this legislation.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Maryland.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. we've been making the point that this is not your garden variety constitutional amendment. I will yield on your time, Mr. Goodlatte, and I'm happy when you have some time to do that. In fact, I think you're going to want an opportunity because Mr. Goodlatte was asked at the hearing on his proposal for a constitutional amendment, which was voted out of the committee, to identify one budget that would meet the requirements of their version, this version, of the constitutional amendment. And it was pointed out that even the draconian
Would
Republican...
the gentleman yield for a question?
I will not yield on my time. The gentleman pointed out that not even the Republican budget that passed the House that ends the Medicare guarantee and is draconian, not even that would meet those requirements, that the budget that would meet those requirements was that passed by the Republican Study Committee, which is like the Republican plan on steroids. In fact, a lot of members on the Republican side decided that was way overboard. That would require slashes in things like Medicare and Social Security, even more than the Republican budget that passed the House. So that is the one budget that was identified as meeting the requirements of that constitutional amendment. This is not a simple constitutional amendment. They know that that's a popular idea. So they're dressing up their particular version of it in that language. Talk about 49 out of 50 states have this. Again, two devices. One, supermajority, two-thirds vote required to cut corporate tax loopholes when only a simple majority is required to cut Medicare and Social Security. We don't think things like that belong in the Constitution of the United States. And with that, I yield 3 minutes to a distinguished member of the Budget Committee, Ms. Bass.
Gentlewoman from California is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the ranking member of the Budget Committee, of which I'm very proud to be a member. I rise in strong opposition to H.R. 2560. I have to tell you, Madam Speaker, that to me it feels like Groundhog Day, again here in the House of Representatives. Duck, dodge, and dismantle is brought to the floor today for a vote. I have to tell you that I've seen this movie before. The storyline rewards the ultra-wealthy while punishing working families. I served as Speaker of the California Assembly while my state staggered from budget crisis to budget crisis. We cut spending drastically from $110 billion to $83 billion, but every year California is subject to national ridicule. Why does California have this problem? Well, Madam Speaker, we have a balanced budget requirement in California. We require two-thirds vote to raise revenue. We can pass tax loopholes and breaks on a simple majority vote. So how's that working for us in California? Well, I'd like to invite my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to come to California. Every year the state is held hostage. Every year my Republican colleagues attempt to have a cap that is passed similar to the cap that is proposed in this legislation. And every year the state reaches the brink of a shutdown. So why on earth would we want to import the dysfunction from California to the nation? We should be dealing with the debt ceiling free and clear. We should not force a default in order to bring about legislation that is not related to the debt ceiling. Our government should not pick winners and losers, which is exactly what will happen if we don't raise the debt ceiling. Whether veterans should be paid, if IRS refunds can be honored, if Pell Grants will be available, and if food stamps can be distributed. And that's exactly what would happen if the debt limit is not raised. I urge a no vote on this bill, and I yield the rest of my time. Thank
Gentlewoman yields back. The gentleman from Utah.
Madam Speaker, I believe the gentleman said he would answer a question if we did it on our time. The question I have for the gentleman is, would you support any balanced budget amendment? Is there any balanced budget amendment that you would support?
I would be happy to entertain a debate.
It's just a yes or no.
Well, no, here's the question.
It's a simple yes or no.
Let me just say this. I would not want to prevent the United States from being able to respond in cases of war, in national emergency. No. So look, I'm
reclaiming my time.
I am happy. I'm happy. The answer is I'm happy to work.
Reclaim the time.
I'm happy to work with the gentleman on that enterprise, but that's very different than what you're talking about.
Reclaiming my time.
Gentleman from Utah.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I will now yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from Tennessee, Diane Black, who is here as a freshman in the House of Representatives.
Gentlewoman from Tennessee is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Last week, President Obama got up on his bully pulpit and he told the House Republicans it was time to eat our peas as a part of the debt deal. And the President said that to us, yet he has not come forward with a detailed written plan of his own. All we hear from the White House is about job-killing tax increases and a mystical dollar amount of cuts with no actual concrete figures on how to achieve it. The President has yet to put his plan on the table, even though the Congress has been asking for a scorable plan from him for months. In fact, he did not even respond to a request from myself and 76 of our freshman members who wrote to him and asked him over a month ago, asking him to come to the table and put pen to paper. And yet, even in the absence of a plan from the White House, the President is now threatening to veto a cut, cap, and balance before it was even brought to the floor for debate. And this isn't the first time that the President has rejected a good plan put together by the House of Representatives. Not only did the House provide a plan in the Path to Prosperity, our House Republican budget, but here we are today about to vote on cap, cut, and balance, which represents a solution to the current debt ceiling debate. For someone who claims he wants to solve this issue, he has rejected every good proposal that has come his way. Mr. President, it is time to eat your peas. I urge my colleagues to vote for cut, cap, and balance. I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back. The Chair will once again remind members very gently to address their remarks to the Chair and not to others in the second person. The gentleman from Maryland.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I would just remind my colleagues that the President has put on the table a balanced approach to reducing the deficit. Would it cut about $4 trillion from the deficit over the next 10 to 12 years. It's a balanced approach, again, based on the overall framework of the bipartisan Simpson-Bowles Commission. It calls for $3 in spending cuts, for $1 in revenue that would be raised after 2013 by closing special interest tax loopholes and asking the folks at the very top to go back to the same rates that were in place during the Clinton administration. That's what the President has said. It's hard to have a conversation when the other party to the negotiations takes the position that they will not allow 1 cent from closing a corporate tax loophole to go for the purposes of deficit reduction. And now we see them trying to enshrine within the Constitution a limitation on our ability to get rid of those special interest tax loopholes. They would now require a 2/3 vote. That is a Washington lobbyist's dream in the Constitution. And with that, I yield 2 minutes to the distinguished ranking member of the Small Business Committee, Ms. Velasquez.
Gentlewoman from New York is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, ranking member, for yielding. Madam Speaker, as we debate how to avert the default crisis, we should acknowledge what got us into the current mess. The real reason that the United States faces this dilemma dates back to a series of irresponsible tax cuts. $2.5 trillion in tax giveaways that were unpaid for and went disproportionately to the wealthiest Americans, put us on this unsustainable path. We were told tax cuts will provide an economic boost. So what did we get for this enormous addition to the deficit? Was our economy strengthened? Were new jobs created? The answer is a resounding no. In fact, the median income for working families fell by 2.4% during the first 10 years these tax cuts were in place, while food, housing, and other necessities became more expensive. Job creation plummeted to 33 new jobs a month, the lowest levels since President Hoover. The record is clear. Giving tax breaks to the wealthiest without paying for it ballooned our deficit, but didn't create jobs. Now, the proposal before us will not just continue this misguided policy of slash and burns, but make it worse. It won't create jobs for Americans, but will slash services working families rely on. Make no mistake, America, this plan begins the dismantling of Medicare and Social Security. Meanwhile, subsidies for big oil companies and tax breaks for billionaires will be locked in. Most of all, at a time when our economy is struggling, this bill will cost hundreds of thousands of American jobs. If you like 9% unemployment, you will love this bill. Vote for it. Vote against this bill. Stop playing pure politics. The American people deserve
Gentlewoman's time
nothing
has
less.
expired. The gentleman from Utah.
We have 9% plus unemployment, Madam Speaker. We've been north of that for a long time, and we're now also straddled with more than $14 trillion in debt. I'd now like to recognize the gentleman from Oklahoma who's on the Budget Committee, Mr. Langford, for 2 minutes.
Gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We have two distinctly different views, and it's not just Republican or Democrat views. One group sees the impending crisis as whether we're going to vote to increase the debt ceiling, and all the crisis is based around August the 2nd. The other group sees the crisis as the debt itself. How you see the crisis will affect your view of how you choose to solve it. If the problem is the uncertainty around just this vote, then we do whatever it takes to get past August the 2nd, and the problem's solved. If the problem is the debt, when we raise the ceiling, we will face a debt approaching $14 trillion with no strategy to pay off that debt, and our disaster is not averted, it has been accelerated. One thing we know, just raising the debt limit does not solve the problem. We've done that many times in the past. The economy that we have now is a result of the actions that we've taken in the past to continually raise the debt ceiling over and over again with no plan to get out of it. What if we raise the debt ceiling and agree to the President's oral plan that he's given of $14 trillion, whatever that plan may be? The best we understand, Timothy Geithner made the statement in June that the plan is $2 trillion in cuts over the next 10 years, $1 trillion in tax increases, and $1 trillion in interest savings, whatever that means. If we accomplish that plan and do that and just raise the debt ceiling, we will then have a debt in 10 years of $24 trillion. With still no plan to pay it off. That does not solve the debt crisis. That accelerates our debt crisis. I have heard all day what a disaster it would be to balance our budget. Only in this room is it a disaster to balance the budget. I don't think Americans understand what we're talking about. I don't think they understand how out of touch we have really become that we would argue about balancing the budget. S&P and Moody's have both threatened to downgrade our debt, not because we're approaching August the 2nd, but because we have no credible plan to ever pay this off. Cut, cap, and balance gives us a credible framework that year after year we will work to be able to resolve this debt, pay it down, and get back in balance. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time's expired. The gentleman from Maryland.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Nobody is saying that we shouldn't balance our budget. We should balance our budget. In fact, the last time it was in balance was during the Clinton administration, when they took a balanced approach to reducing the deficit, including having in place sufficient revenues from the folks at the very top to help cover our bills. And what happened in 2001, 2003 is that we had back-to-back tax cuts that disproportionately benefited the very wealthy, which are a significant contributor to why there's now a mismatch between the bills we have to pay and the revenue coming in, which is why the President of the United States has said, let's reduce the deficit, let's do it in a balanced way, let's do $3 in cuts to $1 in revenue. And I go back to the fact that they want to insert in the Constitution, the Republicans in the House want to insert in the Constitution of the United States a provision that would require two-thirds vote to get rid of a special interest tax loophole for the purpose of deficit reduction. That kind of makes it difficult to have a balanced plan. And with that, I yield 2 minutes to Mr. Farr from California.
Gentleman from California is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Mr. Van Hollen, for yielding. Look, last night I was in a town hall meeting in California, and it was very clear, bipartisan whole group of people, and what they told us very truly is stop playing games. They know that the United States Congress since 1940 has voted over 90 times to raise the debt, and never once with a game, never once with preconditions, oh, we got to do this and do that. You guys are ruining this country's fiscal future by lighting a fire to our fiscal sanity and to our reputation. You want to take down our Constitution by requiring a two-thirds vote. Look, you should look before you leap. California did this by initiative in 1990. That state has had a two-thirds vote, locked up, impossible to get any fiscal crisis. It's dropped from the sixth wealthiest economy in the world. You want to follow that lead by amending the U.S. Constitution and locking in all these tax laws? You're just freezing in every single impropriety that's in the tax code. These people in my town hall meeting said stop playing games. They said it because they don't think you ought to put conditionality on it. Vote for a clean debt limit. I did. Not one of you did it. Not one Republican voted for that. Shame on you. Shame on you on playing fire with the United States Constitution. Shame on you on cut, cap, and ruin the United States. Vote no.
The chair will once again remind members to address their remarks to the chair and not to others in the second person. Gentleman from Utah.
Madam Chair, I can hear the chant on the other side that some 90 times the debt ceiling has been raised. That's the problem, but I can hear the chant on the other side. One more time, one more time, one more time. That's why we're in this mess, is that Congresses in past have not stepped up to the call. They have not said enough is enough. And now, as our debt ceiling starts to reach a parity, we're going to get close to 100% of our gross domestic product. Enough is enough. I'd now like to yield to the gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Young, for 2 minutes.
The gentleman from Indiana is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, I'm on record last night speaking to the Cut, Cap, and Balance Act of 2011, what the many merits are of this legislation. I think it is a fine bill, and I commend its consideration to those on the other side of the aisle. But I have to say the debate surrounding Cut, Cap, and Balance has a certain Alice in Wonderland character to it. It made me open up the old storybook just minutes ago and recall a favorite passage. Recall Alice asks, "Would you tell me which way I ought to go from here?" To which the cat responds, "That depends a good deal on where you want to get." Alice then replies, "I really don't care where." And then, of course, the cat says, "Then it doesn't much matter which way you go." You get the sense my good friends on the other side of the aisle don't really care where we go from here. They certainly don't care enough to put a specific plan for themselves. Unemployment remains at 9.2%. Investment in hiring remains sluggish all around this country, particularly in places like my southern Indiana district. Uncertainty reigns about future taxes, future interest rates, future inflation rates, all because Washington continues to spend way too much money, often on things we don't need, but also on important public programs. And we need to figure this out. We need to figure it out as a country. Our national debt is over $14 trillion. It's time we come forward with specific plans. Yet the other side still has no plan, seemingly no new ideas to offer to this debate, no solutions, only poll-tested rhetoric. The American people deserve more than this during this critical time. Our markets certainly are asking for more than this. Standard & Poor's on July 14th said, quote, "We may lower the long-term rating on the U.S. if we conclude that Congress and the administration have not achieved a credible solution to the rising U.S. government debt burden and are not likely to achieve one in the foreseeable future." We need a plan. House Republicans have been putting forward plans. We put forward a plan already approved to close tax loopholes, something we've heard a lot about, in order to help create jobs by making the tax code flatter, fair, and simpler. I ask for another minute of time.
I yield the gentleman an additional 15 seconds.
All right. We need a plan from the President. We need more certainty restored to these markets. Let's reject this Alice in Wonderland sort of leadership. Don't bring me problems. I say to my colleagues, bring me solutions. One solution is the Cut and Balance Act, and I commend it for your consideration. Thank you.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Maryland.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The one surefire way that we're going to send interest rates up in this country and add to the cost of living for every American is if the United States doesn't pay its bills. Bills for obligations that we've already taken on, which is what this is about. Some people, again, think it's a sacrifice to pay bills for actions and decisions that they've already supported and voted for. I would also point out that the Republican budget that passed the House and that would be put into this bill would require us to raise the debt ceiling by $8 trillion between now and 2022. So let's not play this game with respect to paying our nation's bills. We have to do two things. We have to pay our nation's bills. Every family knows they have to pay their bills, and we have to come up with a deficit reduction plan. The reality is the President has put a plan on the table. The reality is our Republican colleagues don't happen to like it because, as I said, for every $3 in spending cuts, it would ask us to have $1 in revenue from closing these special interest tax loopholes. And again, they want to manipulate the Constitution of the United States to protect those loopholes, to make it hard to get rid of them. With that, I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Andrews.
He's recognized for 2 minutes. Without objection.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the country has a jobs crisis. We have the same number of private sector jobs we did in 2001 and 14% more people looking for work. One of the ways to solve that job crisis, not the only way, is to try to keep interest rates stable and low so entrepreneurs can invest. Today represents a terrible, wasted opportunity. On the other side of this Capitol, this very morning, 3 Democratic senators and 3 Republican senators came together and said they were ready to embrace a plan that begins by cutting spending about $3 out of every 4. It cuts social programs. It would cut defense, get us out of Iraq and Afghanistan. It would take a serious look at Medicare and Social Security, which are, in many cases, contributing to this deficit. And it would say that those who benefit from ethanol subsidies and oil company tax breaks, the wealthiest people in this country, would have to pay a little bit more to pay their fair share. Something like that is what should be on the floor here this afternoon, because it can pass, the President can sign it, and it can solve the fiscal problems of this country or take a step in the right direction. But we don't have something like that. Instead, we have a plan that says the following and puts it in the Constitution. The guy who runs an ethanol company, who gets massive public subsidies to make profits, is completely left alone. He doesn't have to do anything. But the woman who cleans his office at night is going to have to pay more to go to college, more for health care for herself, her children, and her parents, and more for just about anything else she wants in her life. There is something wrong with that picture. Sacrifice that is equitably and broadly shared is needed in this country, but a blind adherence to a special class of Americans who are so powerful and so entitled they pay nothing is the wrong way to go, and the last thing in the world we ought to do is put that error in the Constitution. Vote no on this travesty.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Utah.
Madam Speaker, at any time we would love to see the Democrats' plan. If you could actually cite it across the table to us, we would certainly appreciate it. Now I'd like to recognize for 2 minutes the gentleman from Kansas, Mr. Huelskamp.
The gentleman from Kansas is recognized for 2 minutes.
Ask unanimously.
Without objection.
Thank you. A day like today does not come often, Madam Speaker. In only a handful of instances in our nation's history has our Constitution been amended. There could not be a better or more urgent time for this House and the Senate and the United States of America to pass a constitutional amendment to balance the budget. In a matter of only 2 years, non-defense discretionary spending has increased 84%, and annual deficits have exceeded $1 trillion for 3 straight years, and our debt has grown by nearly $4 trillion since President Obama took office. Let us think about cut, cap, and balance in a larger context. Let's think about who is really impacted by the out-of-control spending this legislation seeks to end. In my home county of Meade County, Kansas, population 4,575, there was one birth announcement this week. On his birthday, that child received an IOU for nearly $46,000 to the federal government. And that's before this president adds more to the country's debt burden. Any request to increase the country's debt must be accompanied by a clear plan that will reduce the amount of money that a child born in Meade County, Kansas, owes to the politicians in Washington, D.C. Let's cut spending now, cap spending in the future, and pass a balanced budget amendment and make history for all America's children. It is the right thing to do. I'm going to yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Maryland.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As part of the plan the President's put on the table that would reduce the deficit by $4 trillion over about 10 to 12 years, he has about $1 trillion in cuts in discretionary spending. He does ask the Pentagon, which is the one agency that has never passed a GAO audit, to help contribute toward resolving that deficit problem. And he also does it without making deep cuts in critical investments for our country, like education, like investment in infrastructure. We're going to see in a couple of weeks a bill that may come out of the Transportation Committee that dramatically slashes, I'm happy to yield on your time, that slashes infrastructure investments at a time we have 20% unemployment in the construction industry. So yes, we have to make these cuts. The President's plan makes the cuts, but let's not take a hatchet to education investments. Let's not take a hatchet to investing in critical infrastructure, and let's not enshrine in the Constitution of the United States a preference for cutting Medicare and Social Security over cutting special interest tax loopholes. That's what this provision will do. And with that, I'm going to yield 3 minutes to the distinguished Vice Chairman of the Democratic Caucus, Mr. Becerra.
Gentleman from California is recognized for 3 minutes.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Once again, the public is way ahead of the politicians. By nearly 3 to 1, Americans reject this Republican budget scheme. In fact, nearly 70% of Americans disapprove of how Republicans are handling this deficit and default crisis. Even 51% of Americans who are registered Republicans disapprove of how congressional Republicans are handling these negotiations. And by wide margins, Americans have sent a very clear signal to us in Congress here. Do not cut Medicare. Do not cut Medicare, I will repeat again, to pay for deficits that were caused by things like the Bush tax to the wealthy and 2 unpaid-for wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Today, millions of Americans are living through tight budgets. As they sit at the kitchen table, they don't have the luxury of walking away from the tough choices as some in Congress have done. They know that they must balance today the needs that they have with the investments of tomorrow. That's why Americans would see straight through this cut-and-paste budget scheme. Under this budget scheme, if an American family wanted to buy a house, guess what? You better have cash to pay for it, because you cannot borrow if you have to live under this budget scheme. No mortgages. If you want to send your child to college, you better have every single cent you need to send your child to college today to pay for the full cost of that tuition. No student loans, because you could not borrow. So much for the American dream, for the American people. 200 days into this Congress, and not one bill yet from this House enacted to put Americans back to work. And this proposal would eliminate hundreds of thousands of jobs almost immediately. How are we going to get past the next 14 days if today on this floor we're debating a bill that we know will not pass in the Senate, that the President has said he would veto, and in 14 short days, it's not an issue of paying our bills. It's a matter of watching the interest rates on people's mortgages skyrocket. It's a matter of watching the value of the dollar plummet. And it's a matter of watching people's retirement accounts in their 401k or IRA all of a sudden drop, simply because people here in the House of Representatives decided to play politics. That's what this is about, and that's why, once again, the public is way ahead of the politicians. Let's get to work,
Let's stop leaving the negotiating table. Let's get this done. The President said he's willing to go with a balanced approach. This gets us nowhere. We need to go somewhere because America still has a long way to travel. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Utah.
It's always compelling, Mr. Speaker, when they have to use a poll to figure out how to do public policy making, and to suggest that there would be no more mortgage is just fantasy. It's amazing what gets made up in this discussion instead of a serious discussion about balancing our books. Now I'd like to recognize the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Mulvaney, for 2 minutes.
Gentleman from South Carolina.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I can't tell you how much I long for discussion of ideas, an honest and open discussion of real ideas in this chamber as opposed to talking points. Clearly, we're not going to be getting that here this evening. What we've heard so far is that this bill is going to dismantle Medicare. I encourage my colleagues across the aisle to actually read the bill before they come in and talk about it. And page 4 specifically says we don't cut Medicare with this bill. We've heard the President say that Social Security checks might not go out on August 3rd. That's just false. The President has every legal authority and the money available to him to send those checks out. If he wants to, those checks will go out on August 3rd. We've heard that the country will default on our debt if we don't raise the debt ceiling. Not true. Not true. The authority is there. The money is there. We have plenty of money with which to pay the interest on our debt. There will be no default on our debt. We've heard the President say he's going to cut $4 trillion from spending, but when pressed on it, he admitted that the spending cuts this year were actually $2 billion. Let's put that in perspective. $4 trillion is $4,000 billion. And the President admits that only $2 billion of that is this year. What we've heard today from my colleagues on the other side, Mr. Speaker, is duck, dodge, and dismantle, which I think is somewhat ironic in that it was the Washington Post who actually accused the President in those exact same words of ducking his obligations with his 2012 budget. Talk about it's now 811 days since our colleagues in the Senate, controlled by the Democrats, have introduced any budget whatsoever. And if we want to talk about dismantling, then we can talk about replacing Medicare as we know it, which is exactly what has happened. The Medicare that we have known it for generations is gone and has been replaced, dismantled, and replaced with an independent payment advisory board. Mr. Speaker, I look forward to real debates on real issues. I look forward to having conversations in this chamber that are similar to the conversations that take place at every household, every business, every town, county, town, and state in this country about what our priorities are and how to spend money responsibly. We are not going to have that conversation in this chamber until we pass cut, cap, and balance. With that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Maryland. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I think the American families gathered around their tables don't have the option of not paying their bills on obligations they've already occurred. They can't say, oh, it's okay to not pay my car payment, but I'll pay my mortgage. They don't have that choice, and frankly, the United States government should not be saying that we're going to make those choices. We should be paying all our bills, and I would remind my colleagues that the reason we have to raise the debt ceiling is for obligations that have already been incurred, votes that have already been taken, for example, 2 wars, an unfunded prescription drug bill, and the reality of 2 tax cuts that disproportionately benefited the very wealthy. Now, I would urge my colleagues to read the bill. The section the gentleman referred to dealt with the sequestration. There's nothing in the bill that says not to cut Medicare or Social Security as part of reaching those targets. In fact, they're going to implant in the Constitution of the United States a spending level that we have not achieved since just after we passed Medicare. And so what they would do through this is call for deep cuts in Medicare. The numbers in this particular statutory provision track the budget that the Republicans passed out of the hill, off this floor. The CBO analyzed that. It looked at the impact on Medicare beneficiaries, and it's in a letter dated April 5th, 2011, to the chairman of the Budget Committee, pointing out that under the Republican budget plan, Medicare beneficiaries will end up paying about 60% of the costs compared to 25 to 30% under Medicare today. It's interesting that members of Congress have written into the statute provisions that say for members of Congress, we will have about 72 to 75% of our premiums and costs covered when we're saying to seniors on Medicare, let's put in these spending caps that will require you to pay a whole lot more. And with that, I yield 3 minutes to a distinguished member of the Budget Committee, Mr. Ryan.
Gentleman from Ohio. I thank the gentleman and would also like to thank our ranking member for carrying the flag here on our side and combating some of the misinformation that's coming out from the other side, and I know the other side certainly feels the same way. But it's not the President saying all these things are going to happen if we do not address this issue. It's every economist on the planet, except for a few that may get paid by somebody who wants them to come up with another solution or another answer. So to pin this all on the President, to say that he's somehow hyping this, I think is not exactly true. And I think what the American people are seeing and what we're seeing now is that as we come to the end, as we get close to a solution to this problem, the House Republican caucus says, wait, we got a solution. Let's change the Constitution. That is not a sincere effort to try to address this problem. We have had people negotiating this day in and day out, and they come in within days of us, destabilizing the markets and say, our solution is to change the Constitution of the United States, I think is inadequate. And I've heard several members get up and talk about this debt in the last couple years and everything else, completely ignoring the fact that our economy collapsed just 2 years ago. Just 2 years ago, the economy completely collapsed, and collapsed in part because of the recklessness and the deregulation of Wall Street, taking the cops off the beat and letting all of this financial machinations continue to happen without any regulation at all. So to put up a placard that says we need to reduce regulations on Wall Street is a recipe to implement the same policies that got us in trouble in the first place. And lastly, I would just like to say, I know this is called a balanced budget amendment, but the one thing that is not included is balance. When you look at the last 30 years and you look at the accumulation of wealth that went from the middle class, wages being stagnant over 30 years, and the fact that in the late 70s, the top 1% of people in the country, top 1% of the wealthiest, had 9% of real income in the late 70s. The top 1% now has 25% of real income in the country. The average CEO in the late 60s made 48 bucks for every dollar the worker made. Today it's 280. And to try to put into the Constitution of the United States an additional hurdle to try to ask those people who have benefited so greatly for being born in America and for generating wealth in America and having a court system and a military and transportation system available to them, to make it harder to ask them to contribute to solve some of these problems, I think is a real problem, because at the same time you're making it easier with your GDP number of 18% to cut Medicare and to cut those programs that are investments here in the United States that keep this great system going. The gentleman from Utah.
Mr. Speaker, all we ask for is a balanced budget amendment. All we ask for is for people to live within their means. If you listen to the Democrats and what they suggest, just go ahead and spend more. Go ahead and keep racking up on the credit card. There are no consequences. There are consequences. I will not. I'm going to now yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Stutzman.
Gentleman from Indiana.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentleman from Utah for yielding. Washington is broke, Mr. Speaker, and the American people know it, and they know how to get out of the mess that we're in. I'd like to reference back to August of 2009. The President visited my district in northern Indiana, was visiting the county of Elkhart. They're in the city of Elkhart, Indiana. And during that press conference, he unleashed some very interesting statements. And a brave constituent of mine, Scott Ferguson, expressed his disappointment with taxes and asked the President to explain how raising the taxes on anyone during a deep recession is going to help with the economy. President Obama responded, normally you don't raise taxes in a recession, which is why we haven't, and why we instead cut taxes. So I guess what I would say to Scott is his economics are right. And Mr. President, I would agree with that. Today we're hearing from the Democrats that we're paying for the Bush tax cuts. Well, I was elected last November, but was here for 2 months when we voted to extend those Bush tax cuts, which now I would refer to them as the Obama Bush tax cuts. So I think it's important that we remember who we should be really pointing the finger at, that we should be pointing it at Washington. There's plenty of blame to go around. What I believe we are in a situation right now is that we have a broken business. It is time for a new leadership to come in and evaluate the situation, and what Republicans are proposing today is that we're going to give ourselves some breathing room with a debt ceiling increase. But more importantly, we are going to show the banker that we're not going to continue to borrow and spend, but we are going to change our spending habits and the way that we operate. If we want to kick the can down the road and say we're not concerned about changing the way that we've operated, that's what the Democrat proposal is. Just raise the debt ceiling without any reforms to our current budget process. So I believe that this new leadership that we are seeing right here in this House is saying we've got to stop kicking the can down the road, reform spending, reform Washington. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'll yield back.
Gentleman from Maryland. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, the President has said two things. Number one, America pays its bills for the obligations that it's incurred. Number two, he put a plan on the table to reduce the deficit by $4 trillion. Again, $3 in spending cuts for $1 of revenue. I would point out to the gentleman the President was very explicit. He said that the revenue component would begin in January 2013, and in the meantime, he's actually proposed extending the payroll tax for another year during the year 2012 so that consumers would have more money, generate more demand in the economy, which is very fragile right now. But make no mistake, our long-term challenge is getting the economy going again and reducing our deficit. And the economy needs that to happen, and it should happen in a balanced way. With that, I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from the Ways and Means Committee, Mr. Neal. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
I thank the gentleman. I rise in opposition to the Cut, Cap, and Balance Roos Act. This is an ideologically extreme piece of legislation that will end Medicare as we know it, and it preserves tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans. I guess some of our colleagues on the Republican side, when they're talking about balancing the budget, they've never heard of America paying its bills during world wars. We paid our bills through the Civil War. We paid our bills through the Marshall Plan, when America was extended as never before. The American people want a functional government. They want a responsible path forward, and this is not the path that they're suggesting. A balanced budget constitutional amendment would straitjacket the federal government of the United States. I wonder how our Tea Party friends feel about a Republican Party disturbing the Constitution to pay for George Bush's tax cuts and recall the weapons of mass destruction, 31,000 wounded in Iraq. That bill is due, and we need to pay it. Whether you were for Iraq or against it, they served us honorably, and that's what this debate is about. The war in Afghanistan, we have to pay that bill whether we were for it or against it. $2.3 trillion worth of tax cuts while simultaneously invading 2 countries. A prescription D Medicare benefit that was never paid for. Friends everywhere. And I hope every speaker that comes to the microphone, including the gentleman from Utah, answers the following question. Was the money borrowed along the way in a series of supplemental budgets to masquerade the size of the expenditures they were requesting? The people that set the fire are now the ones calling the fire department. We're in debt because of the positions that they offered when Bill Clinton left. When Clinton walked out the door, there was a $5.7 trillion surplus. 5 balanced budgets since World War II, and Bill Clinton gave us 4 of them. We're here today because of the policies they embraced.
Gentleman from Utah.
Now I'd like to recognize the gentleman from New Hampshire, Mr. Ginta, for 2 minutes.
Gentleman from New Hampshire.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you to the gentleman from Utah for yielding his time. I find myself in an unfortunate position today representing New Hampshire, listening to the conversation and the debate that we've had here in this House. This is a hallowed chamber, a place that I am honored to serve, honored to bring a responsibility to my constituents from New Hampshire to, in a dignified way, communicate those feelings that are reflected by people in New Hampshire. And I've sat here for the better part of 2 hours being ridiculed because my party has the willingness and ability to bring an idea to the floor of this House. Now, I don't expect everybody, every member of this institution to agree with the idea, but I would humbly ask that members of this institution recognize that there is an idea on the table. Cut, Cap, and Balance Act is an act not only that I support, but I co-sponsored because I feel that America is in crisis, that my constituents from New Hampshire feel New Hampshire and America is in crisis because of the spending levels we find ourselves in. And it wasn't one party or the other. We got here holding hands over a long period of time. But now we have a responsibility as Americans, not as members of party, but as Americans, to do something about this crisis. I will not go home and look my children in the eye and say that their father couldn't work with members of the other side of the aisle to solve America's problems. So today we are here to vote on Cut, Cap, and Balance, a measure that cuts spending immediately, that caps spending back to the 20% norms, and brings a balanced budget amendment approach so the future, the solvency of this nation can be restored. I yield back.
Gentleman from Maryland. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I agree with much of what the gentleman said, especially that we need to take responsibility for our own actions. And that's why nobody should be taking the position that we won't pay the bills of the United States of America unless we get a plan that's 100% our way. American families can't say to the mortgage company, you know what, I don't like the way you're handling this, I'm not going to pay you or whatever. And so we need to take that same approach. Decisions have been made in the past. We're obligated to pay the bills for those decisions. Let's not try and duck those responsibilities for our own actions. With that, I yield 3 minutes to the distinguished ranking member of the Ways and Means Committee, Mr. Levin. Gentleman from Michigan. Without objection.
In this bill, the Republicans are trying to repeal the second half of the 20th century. We've spent decades trying to knit a truly American fabric around a strengthened middle class. It's a fabric that holds at its core retirement security, health care through Medicare and Medicaid, and educational benefits for all through programs such as Pell Grants. For Republicans, the purpose of this measure is to appeal to their base. But in so doing, they are debasing what we have built over the last half-century. And it could not come at a worse time for this country. Republicans say they are dedicated to the markets, but they are essentially now saying, financial markets be damned. As one analyst put it yesterday, and I quote, "The closer we get to this August deadline, the more anxious investors become," end of quote. One anonymous Republican told Politico yesterday, and I quote, "I'm embarrassed to be a Republican. These guys don't understand capital markets. This isn't about who wins an election. This is about whether people are going to be able to finance a home." It was 46 years ago this month that President Johnson signed Medicare into law. Yet this measure doubles down on the Ryan budget proposal that itself would end Medicare. Retirees would see at the very least a 10% cut in their Social Security plans. Nursing home care, which makes up half of Medicaid expenditures, would be slashed. And that is not alone. The devastating cuts to endless programs, such as grants for higher education, that have been vital in creating opportunity and building a strong American middle class. More than 14 million Americans today remain jobless. But instead of using their new House majority to pursue a jobs agenda, it has come to this. Nearly 7 months after they assume the majority, instead of promoting growth, encouraging job creation, and reinforcing the economic recovery, Republicans have been bringing about uncertainty. We must indeed confront the deficit, but not as the Republicans now propose, tearing apart what has helped create the fabric of the American middle class. I yield back.